runs into the association, and we extend that IDR regime within the terms of which IDR has to be completed before it goes external. And hopefully we get a resolve to that in assisting our members if they've got a complaint they need to deal with. As a sum.
Thank you. Phil, what's the MFAA doing now that's really helping them to remain relevant?
Well, we've never really seen ourselves as a regulatory body. Other people may have done that, but certainly since NCCP came into operation, as again A4C have already identified that many of our standards are higher than those provided in the NCCP, and we have to maintain and enforce those, which we do. As you would probably know, we have our code of practice, our disciplinary rules and so forth, and the MFAA Tribunal, which regrettably sometimes has to expel people or sanction them in other ways, but we think that's important for the protection of the reputation of the profession. We're very much involved in focusing on education and higher education. We're running webinars twice a week now, which we're finding very popular. People are choosing to go to those webinars by audio system, and we have webinars, as I said, twice a week on various subjects, running for about an hour. We still have our PD days and our face-to-face PD days around Australia. And last year we launched our MFAA Pathways, which is an on-learning on our system on our website where members can go in and actually do programs that they feel are appropriate to them and where they will learn something, and that of course helps them to add to their CPD scores at the end of the year. But a lot of my time is spent on lobbying, not just politicians and regulators, but the media. I spent about 2 hours yesterday with that lady who wrote the article that was scathing of brokers just before Christmas, and to try and get her to understand just how the system works, what brokers really do, and so forth. And whilst I can never say that she's now totally convinced, that at least she understands the story. And hopefully next time she's going to write a story about the industry, she will at least contact us first for our comments rather than shooting off and writing a story that's ill-informed. So, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to journalists, and I count this as part of lobbying, because it's not only just getting the politicians on side and getting to understand the industry, but it's getting media to understand, because they write about us, and if they write about us in positive terms, that's good, and a lot of times they do, but in a few occasions where they don't, we need to jump on it as quickly as we can. So I've got informal relationships with most of the key finance journalists around Australia, and they will ring me and ask me questions about stuff, and I often give them information which is off the record to help them better understand the position, and I make it clear whether it's on or it's off, and mostly they respect that. So that's all part of lobbying. And lobbying also includes making sure the consumer groups understand where we stand on things. Admittedly, our relationship with Choice is not all that flash these days, given their actions last year with One Big Switch and so forth. But nevertheless, they're in the pipeline. We have to deal with them. We have to make sure that our views are understood, so that if they're going to say something, they know, or at least they're going to get a reaction from us. We're very much involved in assisting our members with compliance and legal advice, and we've just got staff who are just pretty well on the phone all day or emails answering questions from members about compliance issues, or emails about compliance issues. And finally, and I know there's some questions about this later on, it's very important for us to make sure that there is a general knowledge, not only with consumers but the media and the government and everyone, about the higher standards that the MFAA is pursuing, and the fact that we want the broker channel, or credit advisor channel as we're calling it with our new accreditation, to be seen as a profession alongside other professions that are already recognised in the world. Thanks.
Okay, thanks gentlemen. Now, this next question deals with what benefits would arise for us, members of the association, whether it's the FBAA or the MFAA, if the two associations, given that they do so much good work, would there be a benefit in joining these two organisations together? And Phil, let you answer that first.
Look, I don't want to duck this one, but I really think that's an issue for the people in the industry. Associations only exist because people want them to exist, and I think you guys out there and your comrades around Australia we'll make that determination. So we as an organisation, make a decision based on and do things based on what our members say they want us to do.
Yep. I'll take a little bit more forthright approach than that. I don't think there is. What happens if there's Woolworths and no Coles, or Telstra and no Optus? There's a little bit of reality that that anyone in business, and who's here in their own business as their own business, self-employed as such. Yeah? I have my own companies as well, and I've had my own businesses outside of working full-time for the association for a very long time. And I like to be master of my own destiny. Sometimes that doesn't always work for me, but I like to have control. I also like to have choice. I like to be master of what my future is going to be. And to the point that in the 80s I used to teach martial arts. I have it tattooed on my body, that balance and that choice, because I believe in it as a philosophy. And I conduct myself and my business in the same fashion. So I think it's very important that we have choice. And especially as a business person, you want to be able to make the decision, whatever that decision is, that is best for you. And whether that's MFAA, FBAA in this particular circumstance, at least you've got the choice to make that decision. And there's some things there that do create some differences as we go forward, and there's a lot of things where we have commonality, that's for sure. But it comes back to what best suits you, and as Phil said, you'll make your decisions as you go forward.
Good, thank you for that. Okay, next question is a legal question. What would the NCCP have looked like for brokers had your association not played its part in lobbying government and ASIC? What are some of the key areas that ASIC changed as a result of the efforts that you put in? And Peter, let you start that one.
Okay, two questions there. In the first part, as far as I'm concerned, if it wasn't for the intervention of both of us and the discussions that we had independently and within groups, you would have, and so we were completely removed from it, you would have had a very stringent AFSL regime as far as I'm concerned, and that would not have been beneficial for this industry. When we talk about what are some of the key areas that ASIC changed, well, so it wasn't ASIC, it was Treasury. Treasury, the one that makes the rules, ASIC's a policeman. It's very hard. I mean, like I said beforehand, it's been 5 years sitting on committees with Treasury, and it's all about, well, in certain cases, it's about directing and focusing thoughts. And a classic example of that, and it's happened on 2 occasions that I can clearly recall, is that various discussions were being had within these groups. And we'll keep it at the Treasury level for the moment, where policy is being formulated or being discussed and the pros and cons being debated. And as what is now into my 34th year as a practitioner in the industry, I'm just sort of listening to certain conversations and going, yeah, no. So I actually, in one meeting, just before Minister Sherry actually presented to the group at this particular line, I said, stop. Everybody sort of stopped and had a look. And Phil wasn't there at that stage, so I feel you were there. And I said, put your hand up, anyone who's written a home loan, anyone in the room. And there was about 20, I think there's 27, 28 people sitting around these tables. These are the people who are making up the decisions, or making the decision on what was going to happen under the NCCP in the future. And I'm going back a couple of years. So I asked, who's ever written a loan? So I put my hand up. I've been writing loans since '81. Who's ever written a personal loan? No one. Credit card? No one. Anyone written any sort of loan in their career? I'm still the only hand up. And there's some of the things that creates issues, because what you've got to be careful is, I will put my hand up every day of the week and say, I'm not a theorist. I'm a long-term practitioner. I'm not a theorist. You've got a room full of theorists? Wonderful. But as a practitioner, what I can tell you in that particular meeting, what you're saying is fundamentally wrong. And that's happened on a couple of instances. A lot of it is that guidance and direction and input to in the group as to what's being debated, whether it's going a bit down this way, but it needs to come this way, or whether it's completely off the path saying, stop, wrong move, or whether it's being privately consulted upon to say, look, we're thinking of doing this, what do you think the outcome's going to be? And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to listen to you, and I know that times that I've been consulted on it and they seriously haven't listened to us, the response of the ramifications of their actions was actually proven. But trying to define some exact examples, I guess a couple of things that came to my mind is that, and they're fairly more recent as things have, you spend a lot of time debating and positioning things that have come to, I guess, fruition more recently is the input in regards to the KFS sheet, how that was actually going to play out and the timing of that. I was quite emphatic as to how that should be placed and where it should be, and we actually for once had agreement with the bankers in doing it, which is unusual because men and banks don't normally agree. LMI disclosure is one big thing that we've also had a big input to, because anyone who's been in the industry for a long time, there's never been any disclosure with LMI. There's nothing the client even signs. They don't know what it is unless you tell them, and then if they remember it, you're lucky. So the LMI disclosures was an FBAA initiative, and we haven't finished it though. And of course the business lending at the moment, that's been put on hold. There was a very large collective position taken at the last meeting of Treasury saying rushing this through is a serious problem. If you do anything to impact the access to credit for small business lending, and small business lending personally is my specialty, in the commercial sector, that would be a very dangerous thing for this country. So it was trying to be pushed through before the current sitting, or whilst Parliament was still sitting at the moment, and everybody said, you can't do it. It's just a ridiculous thing to do. And so that's now been put on the back burner until after the election, and then we'll see where things go from there.
But thank you. Phil, what can you answer that question?
Well, I think it is true that had there not been intervention, it was highly likely we would have finished up with an FSR type legislation. I guess our involvement started before the Rudd government was elected in 2007, and Nick Sherry, who was the Senator and then Shadow Minister for Finance, made some comments about brokers in Parliament. So I made contact with him. I had a meeting with him, and I just wanted to get him to understand what the issues were for us. And I asked him then, what were they going to do if they were elected? Because at the time, those of you around will recall the process that was being investigated at that stage was that all the states were going to collaborate and have so-called uniform legislation. And there was a model out there for debate, which had some good bits in it, but it created a lot of tension. And one of the tension points in it that I remember was that there was a provision that about stay of enforcement and stay of execution, I should say, and that related to a provision which said that if a broker wrote the deal, a lender could get stay of enforcement, and that just immediately discriminated against brokers. So I mean, there are lots of other things, but that's the one that stuck in my mind. So when I sat down with Nick, he said, well, what sort of things do you want if we go ahead and have national legislation? And he said at that time that it was their view that they should have national legislation, providing they can get all the states to agree, which they ultimately did, of course. And the key things that we said, well, first it's got to be national, obviously, and we don't want a state-based legislation. We said it's got to be one in, all in, because all the focus at that time, you'll all remember, I'm sure, was about brokers. There was no discussion about whether lenders should be regulated or credit unions should be regulated or anyone else. It was all about let's regulate, let's license brokers. And all the legislation up to that time, WA, New South Wales, Victoria and ACT, was just broker legislation. It wasn't legislation across the wide spectrum. So we said, if you're going to regulate this whole industry, and we agree that you should do it nationally, it's got to be everyone, it's got to be all in. You just can't pick one segment to regulate them. The other point we made was, and I can put my glasses on not FSRA, which I mentioned, and also that it's got to recognise the different role played by brokers. It's no good just bringing out a whole set of omnibus rules and say, well, this applies to everyone in the industry, really not understanding how they operate and the role they play in the credit process. So basically that's what happened. And I'm not saying MFAA had total credit for all that, because there were lots of other people involved, but it was pleasing to note that those informal discussions we had with the Minister eventually translated into reality. Some of the key things that we were able to take credit for changing was during the course of the discussions with Treasury, there was again this view of the world that everyone's going to be covered and everyone has to make an assessment of the borrower. And we said, well, hang on, that just doesn't understand the different role played by the lender and the broker in the process. So we invented the term preliminary assessment, and we went to Treasury and said, look, it was over one weekend, I remember we were sitting down going through it, and we said, look, yes, we agree there's got to be an assessment, but the assessment that the broker has to make is a different one to what the lender makes, and the Treasury accepted that preliminary assessment idea, and that's now enshrined in legislation. Another point that came up during discussions, and the discussions went on for years, as Peter said, there was an understanding that if and when licensing came in, that the charge or the cost of licences to brokers would be around the sort of fees that were being paid in WA, where that was the only state in Australia where there were licences that there were charges for. And that was, I think, remembering around the $400 mark. When the regulations came out for licences, and I don't know whether you recall this, the initial paper that came out said that the minimum licence fee for brokers is $1,000. And frankly, I hit the roof, and I went back to Treasury, and the people I was dealing with there said, no, it's got to be $1,000. So I had to eventually go back to Jeff Miller, who was the head of Treasury guy who was responsible for this, and I just reminded him, don't you remember we had a deal on this, nothing outside what the Western Australian fees were, which were around 400, and ultimately he agreed, yeah, and it came out, they revised it, so made it $450. So that made a lot of difference for sole trader brokers who would have been paying more than double that, and that's not occurred. The other area that and as Peter says, there are lots of areas there, but the other area that springs to my mind was some of the nonsense that went on with referrals. You remember at one stage, everyone who was going to be involved in referrals would have to be licensed and so forth, and we managed to get some common sense into that so that there were exemptions, defined exemptions in certain circumstances, and that seems to be working okay now. The ongoing parade of things that we had to deal with, once Treasury handed over to ASIC and ASIC then started dealing with the regulations, there was certainly a tendency from ASIC, being used to enforcing the Financial Services Reform Act, to say, oh, we've got the template for this, we'll just drag the stuff over from the FSRA and put it into the NCCP. And we had to fight really hard on in some cases to say, no, you can't do that. This is a different act, different circumstances. You're not dealing with financial planners, you're not dealing with insurance people and so forth, you're dealing with a credit situation. So the circumstances are different. You just can't use templates and just plant them from one side to the other. So we were successful on a lot of occasions there. And even now, because even though we've got different acts of parliament, they are still enforced by the one department, and there certainly is a culture there that, well, it's good enough for these guys, it's good enough for those guys. So it's an ongoing battle to make sure that anytime any discussion paper comes out, any proposed new regulations, that there's a battle on to make sure they're not just bringing in a template that they've got from somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. Look, I think we'll skip now and go straight to education. And the question there is, what is your association doing to attract and train new recruits to the industry? What future further plans might we see? Phil.
Look, we identified about 4 or 5 years ago, we did an analysis of our membership database, and we found out that of the members who joined in the last 5 years prior to that, 60% didn't last, and they disappeared from the industry. And we thought, well, this is not a good scene in the industry. We can either just say, well, that's life and let it happen, or we can try and do something about it. And we felt that if we're trying to create a vision of this industry and brokers as being a profession, we needed to make sure that we had an ongoing and a viable industry so that people could come into the industry and have a good chance of succeeding. You can't guarantee their success, but we don't want people coming in, having a look, and then not finding it doesn't work and then going out. That doesn't, in the consumer's mind, create a profession. Consumers want to see people who are there, solid, they trust, and they know when they come back in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, they'll still be there. So we started looking at a mentor program initially to get people as they came into the industry and get them involved with people who knew what they were doing and train them properly and get them very much imbued in the culture and get their expectations right about what was going to happen once they got in the industry. So we set up our MFAA certified mentor program where we actually train mentors, and Nancy used us up the back. There may be some others in the room, but I've noticed Nancy there, where we actually new people come in the industry, they hook up with one of our certified mentors. It's a 2-year program. Part of that program is they get their diploma, but they get all the practical mentoring that experienced people like Nancy and others do. And that's, we're not seeing the immediate, well, we're seeing some benefits of it, but over time you'll see the benefits of that. I'm sure you'll see that people won't be coming in to the industry, having a look and then going or disappearing because they can't make it. The people who will come in will be coming in with a realistic expectation as to what the industry will provide them, but also will be properly skilled and understanding of all the requirements that they need from an education point of view, a legal point of view, technical point of view, but also with very, very strong practical experience from experienced operators. So that's the first part. The second part is that 2 or 3 years ago, and it was all part of that situation to try and improve, I guess, the gene pool of people coming in the industry. We started talking to the federal government about how we could extend what was known then as a traineeship scheme in the employment sector to a sector such as ours, which is predominantly contractors. And as you probably know, that you can get traineeships now and funding from the federal government if you're an employee to get involved in whatever career you want to go to, but it doesn't apply to contractors. And we made some proposals to the federal government. They were interested, but they said, look, this is a long-term program. We've got some money available now, you know, typical public servants, how can we get rid of it before the end of the financial year? And that's where the idea of funding or assisting our members, some of our members, for that diploma process. We didn't go into them with that purpose, but that was a byproduct of it. So we've now gone back and said, okay, we've done that, thanks very much. Now let's go back to the original question. And there's certainly interest, I guess, with the political dislocations going at the moment. I'm not sure that's going to happen tomorrow, but there's certainly interest there. We've established to them that, you know, our people, there is a different relationship, but they still are young people wanting to come in the industry, needing funds to start with because there are upfront costs, and certainly if they're going to be mentored properly, there are costs there. But we're hopeful that if we can build that up, and we can make this industry something that young people will really see as a career and see as a profession they want to develop in.
Cool, good. Okay, Peter, what's the FBAA doing to attract new people?
It sounds like both boards had similar discussions, so either Phil's kind of planted some microphones in my boardroom or he hasn't found the ones I've got in here. It's one of the two. But, I'm joking. We've had similar discussions for quite a long time in regards to the fundamentals of the future of the career. Obviously, being in the industry for such a long time, I have a long-term vested interest as to what happens in the future. Because I know from my point of view, I'm not going to be in it all day long. Neither is Steve, I would imagine. But so there has to be something that happens at the back end. And I look at the demographic of our membership and say, well, our biggest sufferance of memberships terminating as such is retirement. So there is an ageing population, and fortunately I'm not the only one in this room that's got grey hair, so there's a few of us probably sitting in the same boat. But anyhow, what we have done is we've actually taken another level. We've just, from Wednesday next week, would have signed at board level a strategic alliance to actually promote this industry, and we're not talking FBAA, we're promoting industry to HSC students and university students to be able to look at this industry as a career option when they're formulating those early days of decisions. It's not an overnight resolve, but it's a long-term resolve to make sure that these people, or these young people, actually know that this is a career option to them, to become a finance broker or a finance professional, leave it as broker. We've got videos being produced and a whole host of initiatives that sit in conjunction with another group that do this as their lifeblood as such. And then there's the likes of Chevron and McDonald's and so on, who are also involved strategically in this group. And obviously I'm a bit clamped to say too much right now, but that'll be formally announced sometime just after Easter, given the board meets next week and we'll sign off or an agreement to it. But that's our undertaking, is to say, well, we want to reach the young kids. We want, when you're thinking about what am I going to do for a job, have this on your tick list somewhere. And to be able to see it, feel it, understand it, and then make decisions in a bit more of an informed basis as you go forward from there. And obviously there's the mentoring structures and so on that exist in the marketplace to bring them through the system.
Good, thank you. Okay. This was one question that got asked quite a few times. Very few brokers ever get asked by clients about professional membership. So what is your association doing to raise awareness of the consumer? Peter?
Who in the room is going to give me $5 million? No? Okay, if you want to run a branding campaign nationally across Australia for consumer awareness, you need to spend that sort of money. FBAA wasn't set up to go and promote to consumers to create awareness. That's not what it does. It sits behind you to protect you. Now, I would fully expect, and I know, because I've been a member of the FBAA since 2003, and I've been lending a lot longer than that, obviously. I've never been asked either. I'll tell you one thing that does happen, because I actually get the calls these days direct myself on behalf of our IDR extension on behalf of members. As soon as there's a problem, they go hunting. Right? They expect that you're a professional. They expect that you're a member of an industry body. They really don't care who it is. What they're interested in you and your knowledge. But when there's an issue, I tell you now, they go looking for it. And I've seen it. We actually, just as a classic example, and I'll just throw this as a quick one for you, it's all been resolved. We had somebody try and sue the FBAA for $15 million because they were dealing with a broker who actually had our logo on their window. That broker actually hadn't done anything wrong. The client actually had to go to the Supreme Court and lost, and the actual judge in the Supreme Court accused the borrower of providing false and misleading information, actually called him a liar. So it's an extreme case. So, but because that person had our logo sitting on their window, he then decided, next line of attack, I'll try and sue them. And obviously it got squashed, it was just a stupid thing. But when people are looking for things, that's what they look for. They look for angles and they expect you to have the backing. And your regulators, and well, not necessarily regulators, but people do expect that you have that professional credential sitting behind you. But it's a lot of money to create a public awareness campaign. I can do a radio campaign for about $500,000. The reach is going to be minimal. People really won't be particularly effective. I used to run $1 million campaign strategically for small business lending. My budget was $1 million a year for that campaign, and it was purely radio and a little bit of print media. When I was in Wizard, and in the early days of RAMS, because I was the first CEO of Wizard, and I helped establish RAMS home loans in the early 90s, our budgets were $4 to $6 million a year. You ask John Simons how much he spends this year. That's to create a brand that people recognise, or to create something that people recognise. That's not what our job is about. Or it's not what I believe our job is about.
Okay, thank you. Phil, what's the MFAA doing to raise awareness?
I think you put it into context. The best professional association out there in promoting itself is the CPAs. They spend between 10 and 15 million a year on doing that with their various ad campaigns and so forth. That's certainly beyond us. But we have experimented in that area because we do believe that we have, I guess, a member expectation that we do that. We've experimented with free-to-air TV, we've experimented with radio, we've done online, and periodically we do newspaper ads in the Australian front page. But none of those in themselves create a groundswell of knowledge about MFAA members. It might just get a little bit of coverage. We certainly know when we're out there in the market that our Find a Broker facility on our website goes through the roof. So it does have an impact. People do click on and see who the broker is in their local area, or check whether that person they're dealing with is a member. But as course, in most cases, if they're dealing with, you've got it on your card anyway, so they know, they probably don't ask. But we think with our new accreditation, Accredited Advisor, we've got a good story to tell. All our members now are across the line with that. And we've got a campaign that we will start in the second half of this year. Using our limited funds smartly, wisely. Quite clearly now you can run advertising campaigns a lot cheaper than you could in the past through digital, online, social media, and we're just in the process of putting together a program. I haven't got the exact shape of it yet, but it will be out there